My name is Ben McKenzie. I'm the Fractional AI Officer at 1584 Design, and today we're going to talk about saving an interior design studio $69,984 a year on AI. And what we're really talking about here is the fact that most people think about savings when it comes to AI in terms of picking a cheaper model, but that's usually not where you want to look. The bigger lever is often in your architecture. And as we explore this idea, we're going to use a real example, and it's from a small interior design studio. And in it, receipts land in a shared inbox and they have to be processed. So we have to read the receipt, or the AI does for this particular system, figure out which project it belongs to, and then create a transaction in their project management software, which happens to be custom so it can talk to AI. Now, we built this before using the Gmail MCP. It's like a connector between AI and Gmail, but the problem is currently that MCP can't read HTML and emails, and that's an issue because a lot of receipts come in that form. So it wasn't able to process all the receipts. So we got to change the system up and rebuild it. So the first way we thought about building this is we're going to go from Gmail to a cloud worker. That's just like a little program that runs in the cloud. And every 15 minutes, it's going to check Gmail and then pull emails into itself and have Opus, that's Anthropic's flagship model, look at those emails and analyze which ones of these are receipts and then create transactions for those receipts in the software. It's a pretty sensible way to build. And the advantage of building it in the cloud is that it can run all the time. Because the way AI works right now is, if you want to run it all the time using a subscription, using Claude Desktop or one of OpenAI's products, you got to leave your computer on all the time so that it runs. And if you don't want to do that, you have to put it in the cloud. The issue with the cloud is that you get billed on regular API rates instead of having your usage come from your subscription tokens. And that cost becomes enormous if you build it the wrong way. In fact, when we estimated how much this would cost the design firm, it was almost $70,000 a year. That's about $5,800 a month. And you can look at the calculations if you want here to see how that all shakes down. Well, obviously, that's a problem because that's like an operator's salary. So we had to examine the architecture, and there were 5 key changes we made to drop it down to something that was just a fraction of that number. In fact, it was 13,000 times cheaper. The first change we had to do was track which emails were already processed so that emails wouldn't get reprocessed. Because if something's cheap and you want to build it fast, you can afford some waste. You can, analyze emails multiple times and you can have some rework. But with some operations, you can't do that. It gets too expensive. And so the way we fixed that is we took a timestamp that would tell AI, hey, anything newer than this, look at those emails. Don't look at anything older. And that change alone made it almost 100 times cheaper. The second change is we filtered emails out that we knew weren't going to contain receipts. And the easiest to filter out were promotions emails when we analyzed the inbox, because over half of the inbox was just promotional emails. So that made it an additional 2 times cheaper. So now we're at about 200x cheaper. The third change is we split the job AI was doing into 2 pieces. So let's say we have 14 emails. We're going to say, hey, of those 14 emails, how many of these are receipts and how many of them are something else? And so what that let us do is cut out over half of the emails and get an additional 1.3x towards our savings. Now, in terms of the fourth change, it was just to use a cheaper model. And this is usually what people look to do immediately, and it's sensible. But whenever you do this, whenever you use a cheaper model, you got to run tests. So we did. We took 23 examples and we hand graded those, and we made sure that Sonnet got 100% on all of our test emails. Now, the final change is to not use the API, but run it using the subscription that the business was already paying for. This makes it effectively free. But if we're going to kind of count the token cost, this gives us an additional 10x in our savings. And you get the most savings when you're on the highest plan. And so if you're doing a lot of AI stuff, you might want to be on the max plan for Anthropic or the equivalent for OpenAI. Okay, now in terms of the final architecture, it became very simple. Once we implemented these 5 changes, we basically had this running as a scheduled task in Cowork on the designer's computer. So they had to keep it on. That's the drawback here. But I mean, if you're saving like $70,000 a year, it's worth it. Because worst case, you buy a Mac Mini for like $600 and you just leave it on all the time. But different ways to make that work. Or you don't leave it on all the time and the task just fails sometimes, and then you just count on it working and running anytime you happen to be working. So anyway, the process becomes the computer is running, a scheduled task goes from Claude Desktop up into Gmail, and then it pulls in the current emails and it checks it against the file that tracks, hey, what have we checked last? And then Claude, in this case, analyzes the emails, classifies them, and says, hey, for these receipt emails, let's create transactions in our software and let's add items to those transactions. And you can see the details here. Now, what's cool is that this workflow costs 44 cents a month instead of $5,800 a month, which is about 13,000 times cheaper. Same workflow in terms of what it does, same accuracy, same effectiveness, but because we were careful about the architecture, it is so much cheaper. And so the lesson I want you to take away from this is that the biggest savings in AI, it often comes from architecture and from thinking, from carefully planning, how should we build this system, and not just trusting that the first option that you're presented with or come up with on your own is the right one.